Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nasdaq Dorsey Wright podcast this week. Today is May the 17th. I'm Jay Gragnani. Here joining me this week is Sara Maley. Sara, great to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to see a face.
Good to see faces. And it seems like, at least as per the recent CDC announcement, we might be able to be seeing more faces here in the coming days and weeks and months. What we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about what we've seen as a result of the impacts across one industry in particular, that industry being airlines, as a result and on the heels of the CDC announcement coming out last week and on the heels of a lot of individual states coming out and making assessments about the mask policy going forward as we move into the summer months with Memorial Day coming up not too far away at the end of May. That is typically the unofficial kickoff for summer. But as we move through this week in May, we saw some important and very interesting news that came out recently, Sara, by a number of the individual airlines.
Yeah, so today it looks like we saw some news just about expanding flight schedules, which I personally have come into some tricky scheduling here with Delta in particular, actually just any flight to Vegas. A trip I was supposed to go on was moved from Maryland, which is just a drive up the road, and Airbnb is now being moved to Vegas in mid-July. So quite a change. Tickets jumped. I think they basically doubled from Friday after the news. With people getting excited that things are opening up. So a little personally affected there. But yeah, they're back. They said they're expanding flight schedules, and hopefully we'll see this industry that was hammered start to pick up.
Yeah, and let's talk about that in a minute. I mean, in a world this week or this year where everybody's gotten used to seeing things double over the weekend, those things doubling were typically things like Bitcoin or other type of cryptos. Oftentimes didn't think about the price of airline tickets doubling over the course of the weekend. And you mentioned the hammering, the beating that a lot of the airline stock took. I mean, obviously, one of the hardest hit industries during the heart of the pandemic. And what's very, very interesting is as you go back and you assess some of the pictures and you look at some of these charts of individual airlines that look positive now, you go back and you look at and you see a picture where, geez, back in February of last year, before really the big impacts, before the big sell-offs were taking hold, you were seeing a lot of technical breakdowns from a number, not just one or two, but from a number of these individual airline stocks.
Yeah, and we can see that reflected and also in that chart of jets. We were talking about that earlier before we started recording, but U.S. Global Jets ETF, symbol JETS, which has those names like Delta and United and Southwest. And just looking at that kind of as a broad representation of the airline industry here in the United States, we see that fund actually moved down to a sell signal in February. So before that, March bottom there, gave consecutive sell signals and it fell as low as around $11 from its recent high there around mid-30s. So we saw this action really across a lot of the charts, looks very similar. And what we've seen is back in November of 20, we saw a lot of these charts start to recover. So whether that's from, holiday travel, whatever, we did start to see a lot of those charts return to buy signals where they've given consecutive buy signals. Now we have seen pullbacks along the way. I think that this is an industry that's been very sensitive to vaccine news and rollouts and setbacks. But we've seen some consolidation here in March, over the past few months, actually since March, I think just since the roll-off kind of kicked off in the United States, but we're seeing some good support at 25 and 24.50 here on the chart of jets. And we see that another consecutive buy signal there at 27. And it's action like this that we're seeing it reflected across a lot of the charts.
Yeah, and it's one of those reminders where we talk a lot about it, but oftentimes we see the technical picture lead the fundamental news. And what I mean by that is when we look at the price movement of stocks, and that's what we do at Dorsey Wright, we're really looking at the price movement of stocks, looking at technical analysis, specifically point and figure, but technical analysis is really designed to monitor the movement of individual stocks from an absolute price basis as well as a relative basis. But very often when we see things like that in airlines, and nobody could have predicted the extent and the degree to which things sold off last year. But when you look at a picture of those stocks back in February, giving sell signals, moving into negative trends, weak attribute names, those are all just pieces of the equation, pieces of the puzzle. It wasn't until obviously a little bit later that the broader news came out. But what's happening is investors are casting their votes, and they are driving the movement of the price of the stock, whether that's selling stocks and creating more supply in the marketplace, or similarly, as you mentioned at the end of last year, August, October, November time periods of last year, where you were beginning to no longer see net new selling pressure on the market at large, but also a lot of these airline stocks, to where they were nowhere near back to capacity, full capacity. They were nowhere near where they are today, but there were investors out there casting their votes and creating more new demand for those stocks, and there was supply, much in the same way now that the demand has increased for individual airline prices or airline tickets, like your situation, Sarah. And so you're seeing those prices reflecting that, as the supply is still limited. A lot of these airlines are still limiting capacity on the planes, and that will probably get relaxed at some point. But you have a situation where supply hasn't changed, but demand for those tickets has gone up, and that's caused the price of the stocks to move, price of the tickets, airline tickets, to move higher. And it's the same forces that we see on stocks. If there's more demand for a particular stock than there is supply, then prices are going to rise. And if there's more selling for a particular stock than there are buyers, then prices are going to fall. And if buying and selling pressure are equal, then prices are going to remain the same. And that's the basic law, Econ 101 of supply and demand. And that's when we talk about the stock market, when we look at individual charts, when we talk about the point and figure methodology. Really, for us, it's a logical, organized way of uncovering the imbalances between supply and demand in the marketplace. And what we want to do is we want to be identifying and owning stocks that are being controlled by demand, i.e. those stocks that are moving higher, and also try to avoid those stocks that are being controlled by supply, i.e. moving lower. So helping manage risk in those scenarios. So I think the airline industry and a lot of individual airline stocks right now are great examples of how the point and figure methodology, how technical analysis can really help uncover some of those opportunities, both those opportunities of new demand, but also those opportunities, those stocks that may be moving to sell signals and showing supplies in control.
Yeah, and honestly, I will say that this gave me a really nice opportunity to teach my group chat about supply and demand. So that, got to throw in a little work stuff there. But one chart that we did notice today, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, was UAL, United Airlines, which were one of the airlines that today announced that they were going to expand their summer flight schedule, which I will say I had that affect me as well, because I had a pre-scheduled flight to Scottsdale at the end of next month, which, I picked out the times, made sure I was going to get to the airport at not too early, but mid-afternoon. And of course, with all of this, they've reshuffled flights. And now I have to be at the airport very early, so I can't change that. But United Airlines announced that they're going to, expand flight services, and that particular fund or stock, return to a buy signal.
Well, that's Sarah. I'm jealous of all these flights that you are talking about taking, and may or may not be taking in some capacity. It's been quite some time now since I've been on a plane, and that's the other interesting part I think that we're talking about here, is just kind of anecdotally, when we think about the airline industry. I mean, by and large, there's some business travel happening, but by and large, there's very, very little business travel that's happening these days. And I know the airlines rely a lot on that outside of, kind of the holiday travel season. So at some point that we will return to some kind of normalcy, seemingly on the business travel side of things. So that will be an interesting situation to continue to monitor. But I think, one of the biggest things that we can do right now is if airlines are on your radar, or things that you own right now, make sure you have alerts set on those individual stocks. The Dorsey Wright system is very, very easy to work through and set alerts on your positions for stocks that may be breaking down or may violate trends and those types of things. So you can leverage technology in that way to help monitor some of these investments that you have, in addition to continuing to see some of the airline stocks play out. So with that said, Sarah, it's always great talking to you. Very interesting conversation that we're having right now on airlines, and I'm sure we could talk about this in a lot of different industries, whether it's the hospitality industry, hotels, restaurants, and the likes. Right now, it happens to be airlines, but maybe in future podcasts we'll talk about what's going on in other industries and maybe even the auto industry. Very, very interesting things that are taking shape in the auto industry in light of everything that's gone on in the marketplace. So with that said, Sarah, thanks for joining. Thank you all for taking time to listen to our conversation or the discussion on airline stocks. If you have any questions or wanted to follow up, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us by phone at 804-320-8511 or email dwa@dorseyright.com. So thank you all. Talk to you soon.